Hey everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and I'm very excited for the conversation we're about to have today. If you guys have been listening to this podcast, you probably already know that I am a personal development and sort of self-help junkie. I like talking about consciousness. I like talking about evolving as a human being. And I think that the world is a better place when we are willing to do our own work to better ourselves and to show up in our communities and our families and our lives from that place and including other people in that process. And I'm really excited because I've got a couple guests on the show with me today who teach people how to do that, basically, who guide people on the journey of becoming more conscious and awake human beings and healing the stuff that's in the way of them feeling that and being that. It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur. Without further ado, Dr. Casey Lankow and Dr. Tim Johansson are co-hosts of the Psychology at Work podcast, co-founders and creators of the A Deeper Way framework and assessments, which is all about creating meaningful contexts where people understand how the security of their identity impacts conscious action in each moment. I'm going to say that again, where the security of their identity impacts conscious action in each moment. I'm really excited to dig into that. For over 15 years, they've consulted to organizations offering tools and services that leverage the art and science of psychology to help organizations more effectively hire, manage, and develop their people. In addition to their own consulting work, they also certify consultants, coaches, and people professionals in the Deeper Way framework and assessments, equipping them with the tools, knowledge, and skills to help their people unlock their potential and create lasting, enduring growth and development. Welcome to the show, Casey and Tim.
Molly, thank you.
So tell me a little bit, before we dive into the meat of it, tell me a little bit about both of your journeys to this work, because I know we don't happen upon it by accident, in my opinion, and it's usually a meandering path. So what's it been like for you two?
You know, for me, I got into the field of psychology really around the assessment side. I'm doing my own work recently and kind of been thinking back to how I got into this field, and around the assessment piece, it really allowed me, not in a helpful way, but to kind of depersonalize it and not look at my own stuff for a very long time. And then I realized, you know, when I started to look more inward and kind of think about what were my reactions about, where were my insecurities sitting, and the more I did my own work, the more I realized my eyes have been completely opened, actually, in a lot of ways. And it made me a much better psychologist, a much better coach, consultant, hopefully partner and parent, but kind of just more recently, just thinking about, you know, I got into it and didn't really spend a lot of time focusing inward, but the more I have, the more I realize that's really the ticket.
That is a really common thing, especially those of us who even go into coaching or healing or some holistic practitioner field, is we don't know how much deeper the rabbit hole goes. And it can seem kind of selfish to focus a lot of energy and attention on evolving ourselves and looking inward and doing that work. But the ripple effect of that in every avenue of our life is like unforeseeable until we start walking down that road and seeing how it impacts everything. It's pretty amazing. I like that that was your experience. What about you, Casey? What's that been like?
Yeah, well, the thing that came up for me actually as I was listening to Tim talk about sort of his journey, and I've actually I don't think I've ever said this out loud. I don't think Tim's maybe even heard me say this. So Tim and I met in graduate school and started our business almost immediately, a ridiculous other experience. We had a professor who said, you know, you can only take your clients to places that you're willing to go yourself. And this is the part I don't think I've ever said out loud. When she said that, I didn't believe her, because I was even equating it to sort of the medical model. And it's like, well, you don't have to have cancer to treat cancer, right? And now, almost 15 years later, I very much believe that. But in part because until you start doing the work, until you start exploring your own internal experience, your own consciousness, unconsciousness, on all of the dimensions of emotional, physical, spiritual, I think it's difficult to appreciate the depth of what we'll never even know, right?
Yeah.
and I think it's in experiencing the not knowing but still exploring that I realized, yeah, you do have to kind of have the experience of doing that in order to guide people through that, right?
Yeah.
Because you hit the walls and you hit the barriers and your defenses don't want you to go there. And knowing what that's like is pretty essential to help people get there themselves.
To know, yeah, and to really knowing and believing that they can move through that block when you see it come up. And I just sort of hear a little like weed in the room of, well, I can help people with traumas that I haven't experienced though, right? And it's like, yes, it's the process itself that you've come to your block and you've learned to move through it and you recognize what that process is and been vulnerable enough with yourself to go there, that it doesn't necessarily have to be the exact same storyline that someone's moving through for you to help them through that.
I love that. We talk a lot about the difference between content and process.
Yeah.
And no one needs to be a content expert on much, really. But it's because everyone's content is so unique, but it's that process piece.
I love that. And I love the theme, the message of this to everyone out there is like, do deep work and you can facilitate deeper work. And that means bigger change for not just you, but also your clients. And who doesn't want that?
I feel like it's difficult to explain why. Because like I said, my default reaction when my professor said that was, okay, sure. But it's almost like, in some sense, in order to really grasp what that statement means, you have to experience it.
I mean, yeah, we are intellectual creatures nowadays. I think it's really common to think, oh, I have a grasp of that because I've intellectualized it. I've learned it. I've read it. I've maybe seen it in action. And so I get it. But the truth is there's an embodiment or a somatic aspect to actually experiencing something that when you see someone go down a zip line and when you actually ride that fucking zip line, it's a very different thing to know what it's like. So, I mean, I think, yeah, I get what you're saying. And I think there's an embodiment aspect to experiencing something personal and vulnerable that we can't necessarily intellectualize. And a great example, my dad is obsessed with non-duality and he tries to share it and get people to get it. But he only really gets it when he goes into it himself and like pops is what he calls it. So we can try to intellectualize it and sum it up and write it down and share it. But it's not until we really know the visceral experience of it can it be as powerful, I think. But it can still happen. We can still help people change without ever doing any work on ourselves. It's the depth of that and the power that it can hold that increases when we really get it, I think. So tell us a little bit about the framework. I mean, a deeper way, and how that plays into, because I imagine if you're bringing this into professional settings and corporate places and bringing it to teams, I imagine there are, probably part of the population that don't want to, and also like unforeseeable change that happens in that workplace after you guys are done there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we talk about personality, and that is obviously on some level a shared understood concept that organizations and people in organizations, okay, yeah, we get personality stuff. But we talk about it differently. And we talk about it on levels. And so we have level 1 and level 2, and that's pretty similar to the typical personality stuff that you do. What are my strengths? What are my types? All this stuff. But we kind of make a turn, usually about halfway through. And, we know our type, we know our strengths, and we've already known this and done this great work. And you're an M and I'm a T or whatever the letters are of the day. But has that solved all of our problems, right? Has that changed everything that we need to change? And obviously the answer is no. And so what's in the way, right? And that turn right there is actually taking personality and looking at myself, right? And how do I understand myself? What's my self narrative? Deeper than that, what are my psychological needs and values? And really rooted in that is our concept of disruption. And when I'm disrupted, I have a pull to go into this self-protection place, right? Psychological. And really at the core of that is when I'm in self-protection, I've lost sight my own worthiness of belonging and being lovable. And I'm protecting against that sense of worthiness or loss of it. And everything becomes a defense when I'm in that spot. And so we kind of turn it back inward, and the things that put me in that disrupted place, right? Those things that I am organizing my life around to kind of get these needs met, when that changes, that's a chance or an opportunity or a spot where I want to go into that self-protection. And so we really work with teams and people around that. And what are the clues for myself that I'm in that spot, and what's my impact when I'm there? But then most of our work is really around how can I get back to that connected place, connected with myself, connected with others, kind of open to receiving and communicating and being back to connection. And so we spend a lot of time on how do we do that.
I was going to say, sort of at the core of our framework is this idea of identity. I'll just say societally, we tend to think about identity as membership in groups and classifications and labels. And it's not to take away from those things. Those are, important and impactful to varying degrees to various people. But the sort of spin we put on it is that our identity has a lot more to do with our relationship with ourself than it does to sort of externalizing it into these categories and camps. And we think about it as, rather than what am I or who am I, how am I in this moment? And that the how is getting at how secure do I feel? Basically, Tim talked about that idea of being worthy of love and belonging, which all humans are, and yet we forget that most of the time as we're navigating throughout the day. And the degree to which I believe that is true for me in this moment determines how I show up, right? If I believe that's true right now in this moment compared to the last one, I can be open. I can let people see me. I can stay in that connection mindset, as Tim was talking about. I can take risks and all the things that security and groundedness allows us to do. However, if I'm not, it's almost impossible, right? Our defense systems kick in. We go to DEFCON 1, our amygdala and our HPA axis takes over, and we literally cannot access our best self. And just to double down what Tim was saying, what we teach, what our process is go in, right, and explore what are the what if worries, what are the insecurities that are obstructing you from knowing that you actually are worthy.
It's just, crazy that we don't get taught any of this stuff.
Right?
You have to seek out an education on this, and most people don't or won't. And because it's uncomfortable and because it's not normal. But yeah, I mean, I'm highlighting first the point of bringing this into the workplace and bringing this into a co-working situation where now people are able to communicate, are able to connect, are able to self-soothe so that they can get through the day with as much agency, autonomy, productivity as possible. That's one side of it. Those of you who are out there listening to this podcast right now, especially those of you who are business owners, the going through the day, marketing yourself as an entrepreneur, sharing your services, putting yourself on social media, building your website, every single thing, not to mention serving your actual clients. All of those things we do, if they're coming from a place of fear or lack or stress or just not feeling worthy of it, it's so much harder for any of it to work, to build momentum, to gain traction, to reach the people you're meant to reach, and then to actually serve those people in the best way possible without these kinds of tools.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I just wish, I mean, I'm sure I need more training in all of it as well. But to just imagine a world where people are walking in, showing up to the table with themselves handled and having that, like, I belong here, I'm here for this, and I know that I deserve to be here. And now where can we go from there? It's like a completely different foundation to launch off from.
I love that phrase, handling yourself. I love that.
Right.
I wanted to add on something you said a moment ago, Molly, around, we aren't sort of taught these things on a grand scale. I would actually take it further to say we're taught the opposite.
Yeah.
Right.
We're inundated with the opposite.
Yes, we're inundated with, you have to prove that you're worthy, right? And it starts at a very young age, right? We start to believe, because of implicit and explicit messages, and everyone has a variety of different experiences with that. But, we start to believe, well, maybe I'll be lovable if I get an A, right? Or maybe I'll be good enough if I make the varsity team. And these things get laid down very early on. And with the people that we work with, we have to work through a lot of unlearning about what actual psychological freedom means. And it's kind of letting go of all of that junk that isn't real.
Yeah. It's powerful stuff. So tell us a little bit more about the certification program, because you guys actually train people to use this modality on other people.
Yeah, one of the things that we kind of came to know a few years ago, so we, early on in our business decided we're going to take all of this education that we got in clinical and counseling psychology and take it out of the therapy room and kind of bring it to the masses. And we started in sort of the world of work, which you've kind of intimated has been interesting at times, because we talk about love. And corporate people get real uncomfortable with that. But that's okay. And what we realized, though, in going into organizations of all kinds of sizes and doing this work, people were starving for it. A deeper conversation, beyond strengths and extroversion and introversion, like what's really going on under the surface. And we realized, there's more of this work to do in the world than the two of us can do by ourselves. So we developed the certification process, and actually we're in the middle of a certification week right now. And it's a week long. We've adjusted to a virtual world, so it's all on Zoom. And we really teach the framework and the principles so that, anyone who's out there as a consultant, as a coach, whether it's an internal person or an external independent person, can really take these ideas without having to get doctorates in psychology and apply them after that week.
Amazing. So that was my next question is this just for masters in psych or anybody with certain credentials already? This is for anybody to go and learn and be able to use and walk away with enough awareness and know-how to guide people through this process. That's beautiful.
In this current seminar group, we have police officers.
Wow.
We have independent consultants. We do have one psychologist, but it's actually our first psychologist. Everyone who's been certified at this point don't necessarily have advanced degrees or anything like that. Life experience is helpful, of course.
Right.
And a willingness and a openness to do your own work, because that's the foundation of it, right? Is bringing people through their own stuff so that they can turn around then and apply that experience to others.
That's amazing.
One of the things I think too that makes our process and certification a little bit different, actually a lot of bit different, as my 7-year-old would say, a lot of it. But when we're done with the week, that's not the end. That's actually really the beginning. And so when we finish seminar, we actually welcome everyone and welcome those new people into our community. And we meet twice a month together on Zoom, all of us doing consultation and kind of connecting. And I think what we found over the last 3 or 4 years of doing this is it's been really cool to see facilitators connecting with each other and supporting each other, kind of sharing the different kinds of ways that they're applying this knowledge to their work. And I would actually say, I don't think there's any two facilitators that are really similar. They're all so different in applying it so uniquely. It's really been cool to watch. And
tell us a little bit more about when people come back into their workplace. Like you've done the training with an organization and then you leave. What are some of the stories of like what's happened?
Not to be hyperbolic, but transformational. I think at the core of the work that we invite people to do through a deeper way is truly accessing and discovering psychological freedom, which is all of these sort of expectations and rules that explicitly or implicitly I've collected about how I'm supposed to be in the world and who I am. It's all nonsense. The ultimate sense of control is knowing that I'm actually first and only responsible for me and what I'm putting into the world. And if I focus obsessively on that, kind of like you said, Molly, that's then the ripple effect, right? I can't ultimately be responsible for you and control what you're doing. But I can influence it by paying very close attention to what I'm putting into the world. And so I think that's the first piece that comes up for me is that I keep coming back to this idea of psychological freedom.
I think two things kind of building on that is one, helping people understand. And when we leave, a lot of people say this, they realize that this whole idea of development and growth, it's not a one-time thing. It's not a two-time thing. It's not a 6-month thing or one. It's like an opportunity every single day. As long as I'm breathing, I can grow. And changing it from this daunting task or this dumb workshop I got to go to or whatever to this is so exciting. And I think that's rooted in that psychological freedom Casey's talking about. The depths to which I can grow, there's no end. Like, and shifting from that's a task to that's exciting is, I think, one kind of byproduct or one thing that people leave with. The other thing too that's really helpful is kind of creating a common language within the organization of how to talk about certain things. And a lot of times, when we come in to a team or something where there's some challenges around how they function, it's this somatic felt sense of it's not right and we're disrupted, but I don't have any words for any of it. I don't even know how to explain it. And so kind of having that kind of common language and that framework for understanding all of this feeling stuff, right? But to talk about it in a way that is non-judgmental, is really level playing field, and we can use some similar terms or some terms together and really know what each other's talking about finally.
Yeah.
I think people say, boy, that really feels great. Like
it does.
We can talk about this now.
Yeah. And to have that common language and to have that sort of stage set for that to even be a conversation in a place where it may have never been a conversation before. Right. Yeah. It's a silly example, but I can remember the first time a boyfriend identified for me that I was triggered and I felt so seen in that moment. It's like, yeah, I don't know what the fuck to say, but yes, I'm triggered. That's all I need to know. Yeah. That's what's true right now. Somebody else had to tell me in that moment, but that was like this witnessing. And I imagine when you give people these tools that suddenly they can see each other and themselves in such a different light, and that only can breed more connection, more
Yeah.
ability to communicate, more ability to navigate through challenging situations. And I want to go back to what you were talking about for a second, Casey, was that we walk through our lives with these negative beliefs, which we've learned, which we've been implanted with and programmed with. And we think that that's true, that I am an anxious person, or I am, stressed, or, I always do this. This is who I am. This is how I just am not good enough or whatever. And we walk through life as if those are absolute truths. And so we carry them with us into every situation, into every whatever job, relationship, going to the grocery store, and how you be around other bodies. Like, there's so many different ways that comes into play. And it is so exciting to think that you could let all of that stuff go, that none of it could be true anymore, and that you could actually just be in the world in a space of you're allowed to be here and you're okay. I don't know how anybody doesn't get lit up about this stuff, because it's so very exciting to me.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that and listening to it.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. I want that for everyone. And so I'm really grateful that you guys are doing that work in the world. It's super important.
I think what happens for people, and just to call out that moment you described with your boyfriend, so often when we're having those moments, our default reaction is there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we want to, what's wrong? And when other people can observe for you as well, that, well, this is just what's going on. Like, you're a totally normal human reaction. There's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
You have that moment of,
yeah.
And you can actually do that for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. The more that you kind of use the skills of self-reflection and checking in with yourself and realizing, oh, this is what my experience is right now. And isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost like there's this separation between the heat of the emotion of what's happening and the noticing of, oh, that's what's happening. It's like,
yes,
it gives you this suddenly a different kind of agency to deal with it when you're not completely consumed with, I don't know what's happening, but rah,
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Casey, you said, we default to what's wrong with me. And that's a normal human question to ask. But I read a quote, I shared it with you a while ago, but as long as we're breathing, there is infinitely more right with you than wrong. It is such a miracle to, like, even on the cellular level, like, what the heck? We're alive. Like, it's crazy to think about all of the things that have to be going right in order to simply be alive, and to just kind of call ourselves back to that. It's a really helpful thing that I find myself returning to when I get stuck in, like, what's wrong with me. There is an infinitely vast number of things going right that if I just think about 2 or 3 of those, I can kind of get out of that what's wrong with me spot. But
I love that. It's kind of feels like a reframe of, like, making a gratitude list. It's like, what's right. My dad actually is hooked on, not to mention my father again, but he's hooked on reading the spine of this book. I don't know how many times he's actually read the book, but it says, what's wrong with right now unless you think about it. So you guys have so much wisdom to share. I'm so grateful. We're reaching the end of our episode. I know that there's probably a lot of people out there who are as lit up as I am right now about just the energy of this conversation. How can people learn more? How can they find out about your certification program? Maybe people are even out there wanting to have you come in and work with them and their coworkers or their team. And also, if you have any social media links, what are those? How do people follow you?
There's actually lots of ways that folks can leverage sort of the framework that we've created. So adeeperway.com, of course, is where you can find all our stuff, including whether it's a certification seminar, whether there's our new book that really walks you through kind of your own stuff, kind of your own journey. I'm just going to plug a million things right now, which I know is kind of annoying.
Yeah.
We're so excited that actually this May, I don't know when this is going to come out, but in May 2022, we're having our first conference.
Ooh.
It'll be in Minneapolis, hopefully next year someplace else. But Humanity at Work, you can learn all about that on the website as well. And there's links to all of our social accounts on there as well. So adeeperway.com. We'd love to have you join our community, and whether that's joining the email list and engaging with social media, or getting certified, or checking out the book, or seeing us at the conference, there's lots of ways to engage with us. And we love hearing from people and their stories, for sure.
Awesome. And any last words of wisdom you guys want to leave people with?
But I'm just realizing we haven't said sort of a core statement that we return to all the time, which is at the core of what we do, which is the degree to which we know and accept ourselves determines the degree to which we can know and accept others. And that's what we do.
Mic drop. Was that what you were going to say, Tim? Yeah. Okay. You guys are on the same page. I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show, Casey and Tim. adeeperway.com. Definitely go and check out their stuff. I'm thinking about going to that conference because I have to visit a friend of mine in Minneapolis soon anyway. So maybe I could just double whammy, 2 birds.
Perfect timing.
And everybody out there listening, thank you so much for being a podcast listener. Yeah, you make the world a more fun place for me to be. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend who maybe needs to hear it. Maybe share it with a coworker who you want to get in on the idea of bringing these guys to your establishment. And whatever happens, keep asking big questions and taking bold action, because you are here for a reason.